Hello everybody, so nice to see you. I feel like I haven't posted a video in a while just because I've been in a filming slump. Not a reading slump, but certainly just not been in the mood to film for YouTube. So hey bookworms and bookmarks, welcome back to the channel. Today is a really exciting video. I'm filming my best books of the year so far for you. It has been a mixed reading year so far for me. Some real sort of meh books going on, and then some really excellent books that are quite rightly included in this video, and I can't wait to share and talk to you guys about. Some of them are new releases, some of them haven't actually been released yet, and some of them are older books that have been around for a while that I'm sure lots of you have already gotten to, and so we'll be in the comment section sharing your thoughts on them down below. So I'm going to run you through the best books I've read so far this year, and then at the end, for those of you who enjoy reading stats, I'll also share with you my reading stats for the first quarter of 2024. So let's get into the video. First up, I want to talk to you guys about Blue Ruin. This is being released on, I believe, the 14th of May, so definitely keep your eyes peeled for this book. This blew me away. I got it as an e-arc with very low expectations, having had no awareness of this author prior to reading this novel, and to say I immediately, as soon as I started reading it, knew that I was onto something special, which is just such an amazing feeling to have when you start reading a book. And I can now say that continued throughout, and this really has been one of the best books of 2024 for me, if not the best book. So it's very much giving Second Place by Rachel Cusk vibes. I know for some of you that will just be an automatic, yes, I need to pick up this book because it's being compared to that. It really is fantastic. So in this book, an artist turns up at the country house of a former flame of his. So 10 years ago they had a bit of a young romance going on, and she is currently isolating because of COVID with her husband at their country estate. It has lakes, it has forests, it has a cabin in the woods, as well as the main giant mansion. And so he is basically seeking sanctuary from her, having not seen or spoken to her for, I think, well over a decade at this point. And he's turned up with a car and a bunch of groceries in the back for him to live off of, and he's basically seeking sanctuary in this kind of old cabin that she has in the woods. Now, for those of you hearing the word COVID and wanting to run a mile, don't worry, apart from the initial setup of the context as to why he's turning up, COVID does not feature strongly in this novel at all. It's just basically the catalyst for why he is there, and then no longer is relevant to the plot and the characters and that sort of thing. So have no fear around that. So we follow this one character between his present and also his past. So we're flitting between two timelines, but not in a way that feels overdone or heavy. It feels very natural that through these daydreams and flashbacks we get life in their early 20s in London as up-and-coming artists, navigating their career and their passion for art, and also their passion for each other, and this new romance that he had with this woman who's now, had her own life and has married somebody else. And then obviously his time in the present, where he's cocooned up in this cabin in the woods, really trying to avoid being noticed by the wife's husband, who does not know that this man is here. And so we also feel cocooned up, and it becomes this very meditative, beautifully written story as one man contemplates his past and his present. And I really loved that. A running theme through a lot of the novels that I've chosen to kind of highlight in this video is this real deep focus on one mind. It doesn't necessarily have to be an extraordinary life or person, but really the kind of meditative, quiet moments of reflection that I absolutely am loving right now in my literature. A really interesting point to note about this book is that it wasn't until the halfway point that our character was identified physically as a person of colour. Up until that point I had been reading him as white, and so it really was a total subverting of expectations at that 50% mark, more or less roughly, where it was actually stated that he was a black man. And that was quite a refreshing thing, really, to not automatically from page one know such an integral part of this person's who they are, that person's being. So that was interesting. I can't think of another book where that element of someone's identity has been withheld for that long. So that was interesting in terms of, it made me think, what was it that was making me do that, and how the author kind of flips that at halfway. Yeah, I found that really intriguing to think about after. This book also has potentially the best closing line I've ever read in a novel, so I'm going to read it to you now because it's not really spoilers, so it's fine. But what I love about it and why I think it's so perfect is because it captures the soul of this novel, so I'll just read it to you now. As I drove, the place I had left, the little house with wisteria over the door, the lake, the endless green canopy of trees, began to seem insubstantial. A vision, a bubble, and the time I had spent there, no more than a dream. Wow, that just perfectly captures it. It is a quiet, natural place, and it feels so contemplative and slow and like a dream. The whole novel read with such ease and mastery, and I can't recommend this to you enough if that is the sort of vibe that you're wanting at the moment. It really is beautiful, and I can't wait to kind of go back to this novel and reread it and go back into that environment and that headspace, because it really was a joy to spend my time, I think it was in March I read this, my time in March really within this novel. So next up I want to talk to you about The Namesake by Jhumpa Lahiri, taking it back a few decades, I think, going from something really, really new, hasn't even been released yet with Blue Ruin, to something that's been around for quite a while, and I suspect quite a lot of you have already read. So I know I'm reading a great book when I deliberately slow down my reading pace to savour the novel and make it last longer, and this was certainly the case with The Namesake. It's not a particularly huge book, but I spread it out over an entire month to try and spend as much time in the head of this character as possible. Again, this is another one where we're just really focusing on one person and pretty much their entire life, from kind of before they were born up until the end, really. We follow a man called Gogol Ganguly, who is a second generation immigrant to the US. His parents are originally from India. And so to start with, we follow his parents' journey as they very quickly go from India to the US, where they have Gogol, and we understand more about why the father wanted to name Gogol, who is named after a Russian writer. And identity and naming and belonging are all central themes to this novel, and his name and Gogol's battle with not liking his name, not really feeling much identity coming from it, his father not telling him the story behind his name. This all plays a big factor in the person that we're watching struggle with these very central themes of self-discovery, self-acceptance, who am I, maturing into an adult, as we follow him through childhood, school, going off to university, getting his first girlfriend. She is a white, upper middle class American. Her family own a lake house in New Hampshire, and so you see him also try and integrate into her family, drink wine with her mother, chat literature with her father, and he really loves being in that environment and wants to be part of the world that they exist within. And those scenes were so well handled, well crafted, totally believable, and I just felt immersed in this lake house environment, but also the times when they weren't in this family setup, when I think they were in Boston or Massachusetts, so more city and academic settings as well. This is not my first dive into Jhumpa Lahiri's work, but it certainly is my favourite of the work, the short stories and the novels that I've read by her. This by far is in first place in terms of Lahiri's body of work as an author. If you haven't got round to this one and maybe you've dabbled in Jhumpa Lahiri before, or if you're totally new to Jhumpa Lahiri, I'd say this is a perfect place to start. Just for me personally, this was the best that she has produced, and yeah, I can't recommend it strongly enough to you guys. Next up, I want to talk about Clear by Caris Davies. This was the book club read for my book club that I run over on my Ko-fi page, for those of you who don't know. This was our April pick, and some people are calling this a novella, but when I googled it, because it's over 200 pages, I think that classifies it as a novel, so I'm going to refer to it as a novel, especially as it doesn't really feel like a novella. This, whilst it's just over 200 pages long, this took me quite a while to read just because there's so much to unpack. It's quite a slow read, and so it feels like you're reading a novel that's much longer than just over 200 pages. And it's this slow burn relationship that develops between John and Ivor. John is kind of a Scottish minister, a religious man who's been tasked with the job of clearing Ivor, the last remaining inhabitant of a remote Scottish island who does not speak the same language as John. This novel has a really strong sense of place, to the point where I would say the place becomes a character in itself. The nature writing is just wonderful. This is exactly the sort of closed room, if you like, isolated setting, two characters, very rural, very remote. That's exactly the sort of environment that I like to see in novels and enjoy spending time in. The full force of nature's power is felt on the island, and it also dictates a lot of the major plot points as well, which I really enjoyed. That nature really was at the helm of this ship, if you like, leading these characters towards kind of the eventual outcome for them both. This is definitely a very literary read. I found myself wanting to analyse certain parts of the style and the themes and the imagery that was being used to evoke certain things. So it really did put me back into my English literature days and analysing texts. The comparisons that have been made already between this book and books like Karen Jennings' An Island, which was Booker nominated, and also The Colony by Audrey McGee, which was also Booker nominated, are valid and are very worthy. I think that this could be a book that we do see pop up on Booker 2024 as well. I would love to see that there. I think it's very deserving of a place. I was really impressed with this. This is my first dive into the work of Caris Davies, and I thought this was wonderful. A book I'm sure we'll all be hearing a lot more of as more people read this book throughout this year, as I think it's only just been released really just in the last 1 or 2 months. Next up, we have a very psychological, juicy thriller novel. This is Fowl by Ian Reid. A couple, totally isolated from the rest of the world, living in a rural farm, are visited by a stranger one day who tells them that the husband has been chosen to be sent off to space as part of a expedition to see if they can basically, I guess, put humans in space and for them to live there. Meanwhile, to keep his wife company while he's gone, a robot will be put into the house to kind of fulfill his roles as a man and as a husband. Except add in this unreliable narrator element, turn that element up to the max, make everyone seem like unreliable narrators, and then let the games begin as we wonder who this stranger is, what his intentions are towards these couple. Is he really as benevolent as he wants to appear, or are his intentions really rather malign? Is what's happening with the wife, what's happening with the husband, are they really who they say they are, what is happening? And so it really is a really psychological kind of mess with your head book, and I loved that. It was handled so well, executed so well. This novel gives off eeriness and suspense in spades. There is so much of it right up until the ending. You are held on a knife edge as to what's going to happen. A really amazing, isolated 5-star thriller. Next up is Fowl Eulogies. This is a translated piece of fiction. It's very quirky. We're centering around an older female protagonist, but again here we have another book where we're focusing just on one person. I'm really into that at the moment. It's not fluffy writing, it is sharp, it is cutting, it is funny, it's quick. This writer immediately puts you at ease as a reader. You know that you are in confident and capable hands. The eulogies of these dead chickens are worth the price of admission alone. They are so funny, they are so absurd, and they are utterly charming as this woman owns and runs a chicken farm, and she decides to kind of franchise this farm as being one where every chicken that dies gets a eulogy. And when she sells their carcasses at the local farmers market, each chicken is presented along with their eulogy, and people can choose their chicken based on their eulogy, I guess, before they then take them home and cook them and eat them. So the whole thing is very morbid, and as I say, really toes that line between absurdism and wit, and is handled really, really well. I had a really great time with this novel. Who would have thought that an original chicken dystopian novel will make it onto my best books of 2024 list? And who knows, maybe it'll also make it onto yours if you decide to pick this up as well. Last up, book number 6 is Kids Run the Show. This is also a piece of translated fiction by Delphine de Vigan. This is a brilliant reflection on contemporary society's obsession with image, validation, and the often hidden complexities behind the seemingly perfect online facades. This centres around the disappearance of a young girl who has been a part of a family vlogging channel. Her mum basically films her life and her kids' life and puts it on YouTube for other people to observe. And the novel is going between two perspectives. One is the perspective of the mother, and the other is the perspective of the female detective who has been tasked with finding this missing child. This is a real page turner, as the two protagonists that we follow have diametrically opposed viewpoints on the use of social media and children on the internet. The further we get into the novel, the darker it gets, as we realise that Melanie, the mother, has been posting her children without their consent online, bribing the kids, threatening the kids, as content creation is their primary source of income now as a family, and so they need them. They need the children to be in the videos to generate income, to pay the bills and pay the mortgage. At the time of writing this novel, child labour laws protect people like child actors in the kind of movie industry, but they do not protect children who are posted on YouTube and generate income for their families, like on family vlogging channels. And so I feel like the author here is really making quite a statement, as laws are always slower to catch up with the changing times and new technology. And so yeah, these children who do make a lot of money off of YouTube aren't necessarily protected by the same labour laws that were put in place for children who work in the industry. So Vigan's tale is very much the tale of these children being ticking time bombs in terms of the psychological impact that their life as kind of kid influencers as part of family vlogging channels that will have on them as adults, through the total erosion of their privacy from birth all the way up through to adulthood. So not saying any more about this novel, as you do follow these children as they grow up to be adults, and the really devastating impact that it has on their adult lives. If you're unaware or don't really know too much about family vlogging and the kind of darker side of this, and we're not talking online predators, that sort of thing, is not discussed in this book. It's not about that. It is about basically a mother's exploitation of her children and what that does to them as they grow up into adults. So it's not about the kind of usual thing where you would think, oh, children online is bad because of X. You know, it's not that at all. It's about the power relationships, the family hierarchies, the rights of children, and should they be protected against their parents, from their parents, rather than anything else. So that is the end of my 6 best books of 2024 so far. Before I get into my quarterly reading stats, I also wanted to briefly mention that we are reading Wellness for my book club in May. This is by Nathan Hill. For those of you who don't know that I run a book club, it's on my Ko-fi page, which is always linked down below if you would like to sign up for the book club. It's a monthly membership, but you can stop or pause the membership at any times to join in with some books if you want to, and not with other books. So May is Nathan Hill's Wellness, and June is going to be Elizabeth McNeil's The Burial Plot. So I'm really, really excited for both of these novels. So if you would like to join up and read them along with a bunch of us who are already on the book club, then please go ahead and find that link in the description box down below. But onto my reading stats then for the first quarter of 2024. So I've read 16 books so far as of the end of March. I know I'm posting this video at the end of April, but I kind of haven't included any of the books that I read in April. So that will be kind of in my midway through the year kind of best books of the year. So yes, as of the end of March it was 16. Now this is very much ahead of my reading goal. I set my reading goal at 42 books for this year. 42 sounds like a random number, but it's just because if I read 42 books this year, I would have read 500 books in the last 5 years, 100 books a year. So there have been years where I've read almost 200 books, so it just kind of balances things out that I'm reading a lot less this year. But because of the prizes, the International Book Prize and the Women's Prize, I'm reading a lot more books and trying to get through them because of the prizes, and also I'm trying to read kind of refresher books in between to sort of cleanse my palette as well, and kind of read for fun. And so far I've avoided a reading slump, which is always nice. So this first quarter of 2024 has definitely been quantity over quality, but that is largely because of the prize reading that I've been doing. That always happens. The quality always goes down as the quantity always goes up around prizes, because I'm never going to get on with the entire list. I think that's the point. You're not supposed to get on with the entire list. So I feel like now prize season is pretty much over for me until we hit the Booker in the summer. I feel like the quality of my reading should go back up again and the quantity should go down, so hopefully that balances out. As usual, my top 3 moods on Storygraph are reflective, emotional and dark. The pace of my books have been 25% slow paced and 75% medium paced, and this is probably the most surprising stat for me because I am normally into slow paced reads, and so I think the fact that it's my average star rating, I guess, is slightly lower than it would be is also because I'm potentially choosing books that are more medium paced rather than the slow paced that I know I prefer. And the majority of the books, if not all of the books that I put into this best books of the year video are slower paced novels. Despite my best efforts in prioritising contemporary fiction this year, literary fiction still dominates as my most read genre. I've read 11 literary fiction books, but to be honest, Storygraph does overlap genres, and so there will be books that are both contemporary and literary. So I think that overall I have been reading mainly contemporary, I would say. Then lastly, some reading goals just to check in on. I wanted to read my first Robin Hobb book this year, and that's going very well. I'm halfway through the Ship of Magic book, which is the first book in the Live Ship Trader trilogy. So I expect to, and I'm loving it, I'm expecting to continue with that book and also finish book 2 and 3 by the end of 2024. I'm loving the characters and the plot, and it's just, when fantasy is like this, it really works for me and will probably be one of my best books / trilogies of the year. I also keep track of the amount of translated books I'm reading. I like my translated fiction number to be very high, and so I've done that. I've read, well, 9 out of the 16 books that I've read so far this year have been translated. So over half of my books are translated, and that is excellent. I'm very pleased with that. Obviously, the International Booker helps a great deal with that. I personally have loved the International Booker Prize longlist this year. It's been fantastic. Some of the books that I read for that will be on my best books of the year video come June, July time. Just that I read them in April, so I'm not including them in this first quarter video. Then the very last goal that I want to check in on is that I set myself an author spotlight this year. This was for Margaret Atwood and John Boyne. I chose 3 books from Boyne and 3 books from Atwood's backlist that I wanted to get to this year, and I've only gotten to one, which is The Edible Woman, which I ended up DNFing because I didn't really like the characters or the themes that much. This felt like Atwood in a more rough and ready form. I think it was her debut or one of her very first novels, so I feel like she was kind of finding her feet, and so this doesn't really hit as hard as some of her more experienced novels. But I still have faith that I will get to the other 5 books that I originally set myself at the beginning of the year from both of these authors, so I still have plenty of time. Yeah, 5 books is more than achievable for me, so I will leave it here. Let me know what books you've been loving in this first quarter of 2024. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I've mentioned. Give me your opinions, any thoughts you have on them, and I shall see you very soon for my next video, guys. Thanks for watching. Bye!